Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Story Impact. I'm your host, Lisa Tolles. If this is your first visit, this series showcases authors where we talk about their books, their craft, artistic vision, their writing journey, and the overall purpose driving the creation of their books. But we also talk a lot about audience here, how they reach their readers, and the impact and meaning that they hope their books will bring. I'm also a crime novelist, and you can find my books on Amazon and through other retailers. And to learn more, go to lisatolles.com. All right, I want to introduce our speaker today. Elizabeth Aden, Elizabeth Reed Aden, she goes by Betsy, has a doctorate in biomedical anthropology, which includes epidemiology, immunology, virology, ethnography, ethology, and extensive data analysis integrating cultural and biological data to understand the natural history of hepatitis B virus on a remote South Pacific island. I'm going to ask questions. I'm so fascinated by that. She later went to that island to do field research, gathering cultural and biological data. And I definitely want to ask you about that location, but also that research that you were doing. But then, bored with academia, Betsy took her problem-solving skills to pharma and led global strategy for a major Swiss pharmaceutical company. So today she's with us to talk about her global travels, her passion for research, and most importantly, her debut novel, The Goldilocks Genome, a medical thriller with a female hero who uses epidemiology and pharmacology to solve a murder and catch a serial killer. I love it. I literally can't wait to read this book. All right, Betsy, warmest welcome, and thanks for joining me on Story Impact.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so let me ask you a few questions so our readers can get to know you, and I want to unpack some of that really interesting bio. So you live in Berkeley, but you're actually in Spain right now. What part of Spain are you in, and what are you doing there?
Well, we're in Valencia, Spain. My husband grew up in Italy, and when we lived in Switzerland, we both loved Europe. So we decided it would be super to have a place in Europe that we could go to for 4 to 5 months a year. So we decided on Spain because he spoke Spanish, and it didn't matter to me where we ended up. And I love it. I absolutely love it. It's been an amazing adventure learning about Spain, the Moors. Spain is unique in Europe, and it's just been fun.
Tell me about the Argentinian parrots.
Well, what we didn't know when we bought this apartment was that every night a swarm of thousands of tens of thousands of parrots would come into the trees right outside our balcony, and they'd spend time running up and down guy wires, sliding up and down, playing, chatting, making a cacophony of conversation about how did you spend your day? Oh, I went to the zoo. What did you find? Oh, no, I was at the park. Oh my gosh, I met the cutest little kid who gave me, the most amazing bread. And they do this for about 20 minutes, and then they go to sleep. When the sun goes down, they go to sleep. And then every morning when the sun comes up, you'll never guess what they do. They wake up and say, oh, where are you going today? Oh, I think I'll go blah, blah, blah. And they fly off in a herd, in different herds, going to who knows where until they come back in the evening and tell us about the day.
Well, that sounds like a children's book waiting to happen. Seriously, that's funny. All right, so let's shift and talk about really the crux of your academic background in your life's work. Epidemiology is at the very foundation of not only your books but your career, your education, your personal interests. All this time, I thought epidemiology was the study of diseases, and it's really not. So, can you define what it is for a layperson?
Well, if you take apart the word, epi meaning Greek for happening to, demos, demi, people, and ology, of course, is science. So it's actually the science of what happens to people. So disease is one thing that happens to people, but accidents can happen to people, equipment can break, all sorts of things can happen that have consequences to people's health. And epidemiology, in my mind, is the problem solving that tries to figure out the what, the why from the information that's part of the where and the how.
Mm. All right. Well, with that in mind, do you think in a way, I'm a crime novelist. I've been a crime novelist for a long time. It's all I read basically. And when you're saying this, kind of like the who, what, where, why, the peeling back of layers and the like discovery, do you think in a way that epidemiology sort of mimics the process of crime detection? And if so, how do you pull that into your books? Because now you're a fiction writer.
Well, I'd like to think that crime writers are imitating epidemiologists, but that's another discussion. But you're absolutely right. I think it's very much the same process because you're collecting data, you're gathering information, you're always formulating a hypothesis about what you think happened as the reader. And in fiction, you're also trying to put out red herrings, lead the reader somewhere else, and then come back, give them a little bit more information, tease them.
Mhm.
Oh, you think that? Oh, how wrong you were. And they're always three seconds from death, no matter where they're going. Every phone call always ends in somebody's murder. You know this. So it's all part of weaving together because real life is also complicated. And so it's, I think of it as actually very similar. And the goal is to figure out who done it or what done it or what and or why it was done.
Mm. So fascinating. I really can't wait to dive into this book. Let's talk about Carrie Hediger, your main character. How much of you is in her? And can you tell us about her?
Okay, so there's a fair amount of me, as my husband tells me, in Carrie Hediger. The name actually came from two friends of mine in graduate school, and I gave them each a copy of the book when I was visiting them 3 months ago. So it's a combination. Um, there's there's an awful lot of me in there. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Not completely. Just want to make that crystal clear, but a fair amount.
Okay, so there's a little fiction and a little nonfiction in there. That's probably the case for most of us. How did the idea, um, I mean, it seems obvious to me when I read what this book is about and I read your background, I can see how one kind of led to the other. But Carrie, how did the character come to you?
Well, the I think you have to back up one more step, which is why fiction. And that happened in a parking lot listening to NPR, where one of the founders of stem cell therapy was talking, being interviewed, and he was asked, well, how does the lay public learn about science? And he said, fiction. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. I love Michael Crichton. I love Kathy Reichs. I love fiction that's filled with fact.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, okay. And I guess around that time we'd had all the anthrax scares and all those kinds of possible terrorist domestic terrorism concerns. And so I thought, well, I wonder. And that's where it began.
Interesting. Yeah, and it seems like readers now have such a hunger for that. I mean, I remember when Tom Clancy's books, which are very, very historically based, a lot of military history, a lot of like deep technical complexity. When that was kind of cutting edge in fiction, and now it's not, as you say, it's not cutting edge at all. I mean, people hunger for that. I mean, like there's still a big market for cozy mysteries, like the Agatha Christie's, where where it's a small contained town and there's a dead body in the first chapter and it's much more formulaic. And don't get me wrong, I love that formula and I eat those up. But these other types of more complex thrillers are more popular now, and it seems like they're really kind of taking off. um So it sounds like in the Goldilocks Genome, it sounds like Carrie used some really edgy, innovative methods for crime detection. How did the plot of this book evolve for you? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it evolved in a number of ways. So first I thought, well, how hard is it to say, for example, poison a reservoir? Well, that turns out to be really difficult. So I had to come up with a plan B and then a plan C and ultimately a plan D. So I iterated a number of things through, and fundamentally it had to make sense to me. Was this something that was logical? Is this something that people could actually do? Was it affordable? And unfortunately, to some extent, was it actually real?
Hmm.
And that to me was the fun part, doing a lot of the research. And I already knew a great deal, but I amplified what I did know. And that was fun. And then it was like, and then I worked with some editors who said, oh, your first version, it's way too long. We need to condense, we need to collapse. You need to kill some more people. Okay, not a problem. Let me go kill some more people. So I think, how am I going to kill this person and still leave some evidence behind? And it was fun. It was just fun.
Wow, it's great seeing your face and your passion and your like excitement talking about this. I mean, it's obvious that writing brings you a lot of joy. And for me too, either reading or writing fiction is a fantastic escape. I mean, I freely admit that, with everything that's going around us, everything that's happening in our circle and then kind of beyond in the world, fiction's a wonderful escape to focus on somebody else's problems. And I love that aspect of it. Um, what are what are the mechanics of how you write? So I know that you're spending an extended period of time in Spain. I'm curious about like where you write, how often you write, if you're a highly disciplined writer, or if you write when the mood strikes you. I guess the question is, what kind of a writer are you?
I write to deadlines, period. I really believe that if you miss a deadline, you die. So I have zero discipline. I'm not one of these people who I admire greatly says every morning I'm going to do 1,000 words. No, I don't. If it's due on Saturday, I'll start really worrying about it Thursday.
Hmm.
And then I will make my deadline. And in fact, today I had a deadline and I made it by 2 minutes. So,
Excellent.
you know,
So you work well under pressure and you spend a lot of time in corporate and in academia. So I'm sure, yeah. Well, what's really interesting to me is that you are drawn to fiction. I mean, like um, with your, um, with your academic pedigree and all of your degrees, I'm sure you had to do tons of writing, dissertation, not just dissertations, which is, like something very formal, but I mean like constantly writing papers and then having orals where you stand up and you defend your thesis. And, so you had a lot of practice writing and kind of putting different kinds of stories together, but yet you didn't write a nonfiction book. You created a fictional kind of scenario and made up people to go through those. So why fiction and not nonfiction? Or do you also have plans to write nonfiction books?
so let's take it first. Why fiction? Uh, one, because I thought I could get away with more in fiction. If I stuck to nonfiction, it had to be real and I wanted to explore it. And I think also because my godmother wrote cozy mysteries
Hmm.
and I was read them when I was in college and I liked them. And I went and to the places where she had written about in a book that I actually got published called A Vacation to Kill For. And it was like, okay, well, okay, that's interesting. I can make things up. I don't have to be true to people, or I can have them do things that might not happen in real life. So that was pretty intriguing, and it was a challenge because I'd never had to do that.
Mm. Hmm. Well, my next question, I think I'm going to know the answer, but my next question was going to be who inspired you to become the writer that you are, and who's encouraged you to stay on this path? And so the answer to that might be your godmother, but I'll let you answer it?
Well, I think she showed me that normal people can do this, but I'm nowhere near as clever as she is. She was actually like an American Agatha Christie, undiscovered, but incredibly clever. I mean, if you like cozy mysteries, check her out. It's on my website. She's really, really good because I wouldn't waste my time getting all of her works republished if I didn't think she was really good.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So just to be clear, her name is Eunice Mays Boyd. Is that correct?
Well, I called it Eunice Mays Boyd, but
Eunice Mays Boyd. Okay.
that was probably a West Coast accent.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so Eunice Mays Boyd, and tell us what you're doing with her collection. Have you added anything to her books, or you're republishing them as is, or tell me about that.
Well, when my mother died and we were preparing her house for an estate sale, I found four unpublished manuscripts that she'd written that were just typed in stationery boxes, hundreds of pages of typed papers. So I read them. I liked the mysteries because they were set in San Francisco. One was dedicated to my mother when she was actually married to my father, which was not a very long period of time. So
Mm,
I could date when these happened, when they were written. So from the late 40s through the mid 50s, and then her last one just before she died in 1970. So I approached a couple of publishers who would take books without an agent. And one of them, Level Best Books, said, we'll take the whole thing. We'll republish the book she wrote in the 1940s, that one of which won the honorable mention in the third Mary Roberts Reinhardt Mystery Contest. Woohoo! And so they published all three of the unpublished manuscripts, and they're now publishing the Alaska Vintage series. And there's one more published book that will be republished, and the fourth book in that series will be also republished at some point.
that's
So
awesome. I love that publisher too. That's so great to hear. And that must be so meaningful to you, to kind of lift up her work and give it the visibility that it didn't have when she was still alive. That must just feel so good to your heart.
it actually does. It's sort of like the great big checkbox in the sky.
Hmm. Um, so let's go back to you, to something that I was really interested in when I read your bio. Your books are infused with this sort of mission, educating people about what you call individual genotyping. Could you describe what genotyping is for a layperson and why it's so important?
So it's pretty simple. Your body, you run on genes. Your DNA is your genes are made of DNA. So genotyping is telling you what genes you have. So we all pretty much have the same genes, but we have variants within those genes, and those are called alleles. So if I want to be genotyped, I go to 23andMe and I get the information about my genes. So I have, it's actually not my full, well, I have a partial genotype. A full genotype would be what's called a full genome scan. And that reads your DNA from start to finish. And you know if you have insertions, deletions, everything about it. 23andMe works on the principle of these single nucleotide polymorphisms. So what it does is it cuts your genes into segments where there's one difference between you and the entire population. Just
Mm, mm,
one difference in the base pair, and DNA is made up of a series of base pairs. So there are a zillion different SNPs. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands. But from those SNPs, you can figure out, am I likely to have this disease or not? And so
mm,
it's kind of complicated. So that's why I created a how-to book that's available on my website
mm,
that takes you through how to take your 23andMe or Ancestry data and then walk through and see if you and your prescription medicines have a Goldilocks effect. And that's where the title comes from, because for prescription medicines, there's a Goldilocks effect,
Mm.
meaning that about 40% of a a prescription drug is about right, just about right for 40% of people, and it's too little or too much for the remaining 60%.
Mm.
And so this walks you through how to figure out where you and your drugs are within the Goldilocks spectrum.
Interesting. So what 23andMe is doing is sort of creating a snapshot, or like simplifying the full extensive genome into something that's bite-sized enough that your average person could comprehend and then kind of make some decisions decisions about. So if you ordered the full genome, then you would probably get a more accurate picture of what you were susceptible to, as opposed to just that tiny snip that says you might be susceptible to this disease or that disease.
Yeah, you get a better read. And there's right now commercially, there's one company that's offering it, and it's about 3 times more expensive than 23andMe.
Hmm.
But 23andMe won't give you some of the answers you're looking for, which is why I did that giveaway called Drugs and Genes, so that it takes you through step by step to go to which the third party sites that will allow you to make those, to get the fuller information about what you might be susceptible to, what drugs might work well for you, or what wouldn't work well.
Hmm. So you are doing nonfiction writing then. You're writing fiction as Carrie, but then you are doing nonfiction writing, and I think that's great. Um, who are the authors that you come back to again and again?
Oh, well, I love Michael Crichton. Frederick Forsyth, I
Mm.
think is fantastic.
Hmm.
Dick Francis, I love horses, and I enjoy learning about horse racing.
Mm.
Reichs, she's a physical anthropologist.
Hmm.
I studied physical anthropology. I
Hmm.
even like Lawrence Sanders, who told you who the killer was right up front. And then I think he was more of my template. And then he helped piece together, how did we get to catch him at the end?
Mm. Yeah, it's kind it sort of takes the formula and turns it on its side. I like that. And yeah, here's the killer, and like now you're going to spend 300 pages figuring out why and how we got here. Yeah. So I have a couple more questions about writing for you, but I want to go back to something that I'm fascinated in, and that's I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Vanuatu, how do you pronounce that? And that's the South Pacific island where you did all your research about hepatitis B, and I have to hear about that.
Okay, first of all, congratulations. You said it right.
Okay.
I'm really impressed. It's Vanuatu,
Okay.
and it means our home. And it's an archipelago of 60 plus islands in, it's the middle of the, well, at the left of the big blue on your map, about 1,000 miles due east of Australia.
Mhm.
Uh, it's in Melanesia, and there's no electricity, there's no running water. People live very, very comfortably. It's like elegant camping
Mm.
because they're in a bread basket. There's 13 different types of mangoes. There's papaya, there are pigs, there are cows, there are chickens, dogs. It's really pretty nice.
Mm. And when you lived there, this was I think earlier in your life, you were there doing research, is that right?
I did my field work for my doctorate there, and that's where I studied hepatitis B, the natural history of infection with hepatitis B, because there's an awful lot of the virus out there.
And and why? I mean, I don't want to take a tangent and spend a long time on this, but I mean, I that's what's interesting to me about epidemiology, like why that disease and so much of it there.
Okay, so I first made the decision that I wanted to be an anthropologist and I wanted to study in the South Pacific because I'd done my master's thesis on reconstructing Proto-Polynesian, primarily because I had a crush on the professor and he had lived in Polynesia. So, and then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, that could work. I like beaches, I like swimming and French food. What could go wrong? So my vision was Tahiti. I got to Penn, and then my advisor said, well, we can't offer you Tahiti, but how would you like a summer out in what was then called New Hebrides? I said, oh, okay, well, Polynesia, Melanesia, at least they have Asia in common. And so I went, and it turned out at that time, um, New Hebrides, now Vanuatu, was a French and British colony. So I could get beaches and I could get French food. So that sounded good. So I was there for 3 months helping another Penn student who was an archaeologist. And I found I was really not cut out to be a cultural anthropologist at all.
Mm.
I I knew culture when I saw it, but I could never describe it. So I came back and said, okay, time for a reset. I like the area, but I need to do something different. And I have 1 semester left. What am I going to do? And someone said, take this course with this guy. He does medical anthropology. Well, it turned out he was the person who discovered hepatitis B virus. And
Mm.
he knew that the prevalence of the virus was really high in the Solomon Islands, which was the island group just north of Vanuatu.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, maybe we can work this out. I want to go back. You want someone to go and take blood. And so he supported me. And that's how I learned epidemiology and virology and immunology and all those ologies.
All right, so reflecting on your writing in general, what would you say your purpose as a writer is, and what do you hope to leave your readers with when they read the Goldilocks Genome?
So I want my readers to become aware that there is a Goldilocks effect in prescription medicine, that one size does not fit all, and that if your healthcare system or your doctor doesn't take control of that, you can. The tools are available, you can do it, and you are the most important advocate for your health or the health of your loved ones. And I hope this helps bring that message home.
Awesome. All right, well, please visit elizabethreadaden.com to check out the Goldilocks Genome and her upcoming releases. And thank you, Betsy, for joining us today. And thank you, viewers, for joining. And we will see you next time.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It was fun.
Thank you.